All right, what is up, my friends? Welcome to Random Bible number 4, where I take a random verse from the Bible that I think is interesting and talk a little bit about it, and apparently also wear a different hat in each episode because I have a new hat on now. It's gonna get challenging, but I'm up to the challenge. Okay, so today's Random Bible is not that long, but I think it's very interesting. So I'm reading a couple verses, so I don't have anywhere for you to read it, so I'm going to give you a second now to get a Bible, or go to BibleGateway.com right now, ready to go. Ukulele solo. Okay. All right, hopefully, okay, you either have a Bible or you went to BibleGateway.com, because open up the new tab, Bible Gateway. Okay, good, you're all there. Okay, first verse is from Mark 3, verses 13 and 14. So get there, Mark 3, verses 13 and 14, as I find it. Mark 3, verses 13 and 14. Okay, so here's what it says. This is about Jesus, talking about Jesus. He's a cool guy, you should meet him. So it says this, afterward Jesus went up on a mountain and called out the ones he wanted to go with him, and they came with him. Then he appointed 12 of them and called them his apostles. Okay? So first thing, Jesus, beginning his ministry, chooses 12 guys to follow him. We've all heard the 12 disciples. Okay. Second verse is from Luke 9, verses 28. Verses 28 and 29. Luke 9, verses 28 and 29. Wait for it. Okay, here's what it's called. Okay, here's what this says. Okay. So this, about Jesus again, it says, about 8 days later, Jesus took Peter, James, and John up on the mountain to pray. And as he was praying, his appearance of his face was transformed, and his clothes became dazzling white. Okay? Second verse. Peter, James, and John, Jesus chose these 3 guys to go with him to pray, and then the transfiguration happened. Okay, final verse is from John 13, verse 23. John 13, I probably should have marked the pages, but I didn't even think of that. John 13, verses 23 says this. Okay, so this is the Last Supper, and this simple verse, all it says is, the disciple Jesus loved was sitting next to Jesus at the table. Now here's what I think is interesting, is we have this picture of Jesus, of God in human form, coming to earth, and you would think he would come to earth and be like, he's God. So you feel like he'd come to earth and be like, I have this mission, I'm going to accomplish it, I'm going to do it. But one of the first things Jesus does in his whole earthly life is chooses a community of people to be around him. And he starts with choosing 12 guys that are going to follow him and surround him and support him, and he's going to teach and pour into. And then the next verse that we realize, Jesus had kind of like an inner circle of closer friends who really knew him, more deeply and intimately, and he, brought with him to pray, and they saw him transformed in all his glory. And then this final verses, we see that there was this one disciple, John, who he was really, really close to. I mean, if the Bible used the terms that we would today, would say BFF for sure. The Bible doesn't do that. But so we have this picture of Jesus with like a larger community, then kind of a smaller community, and then one guy who he really, really connected with. In fact, what's really interesting is there's a verse later in John, where as Jesus is hanging on the cross, he looks at his mother, Mary, who birthed him, and John, like his best friend, is standing right next to her, and he says to her, "Woman, behold your son," because Jesus was like, he was dying and going, resurrecting and going up to heaven, and he says, his best friend and his mom, he says, "Here is your new son, here is your new mother." So we have this really interesting picture, and I think a lot of times, I know I do at least, think that I'm okay to do life alone. You know what I mean? Like, I don't need anybody. I'm just going to, kind of fly it solo. I'm just going to be a loner. I can get through it on my own. I don't need anybody. But let me ask you this. I mean, if God, in human form, comes to earth and on his life, in his life decides that he needs a community of people around him, how much more do we need that? I remember just before I came to work at Heartland, I was actually living up in Michigan, and I moved up there to take a job, and it was a fun job. I was excited about it. But after like 2 weeks, I was just so lonely, because I was just like, I don't know anybody here. So I drove home every weekend to hang out with my mom. But anyway, but I kind of thought my experience in Michigan was going to be great. I was like, it'll be just me and God, and I'll have a lot of great time with him, and we'll commune and have prayer, and I'll read my Bible. But after a while, I was just like, man, I'm just so lonely. And after about 3 days of coming to Rockford and starting to work at Heartland and meeting some friends, I just remember the Lord so clearly saying to me, you cannot grow in your relationship with me without people in your life. And that was such a learning point for me to understand. I mean, there's something to be said for solitude and time alone with God. That's wonderful. But we need people in our lives to challenge us to grow more as people and in our relationship with God. I heard one person say, sometimes there's ways that you need to grow that you can't see, but somebody who's standing outside of you can see. So let me just encourage you, man, don't think that you can do life alone, because Jesus, God, came to earth and demonstrated like he didn't want to do life alone. He needed people around him, and so do we. So when you come to Genesis, engage in your small group, like talk with what's going on in your life, listen and encourage when other people talk, and even more than that, like surround yourself with a community of people that can encourage you and build into you. And maybe God's blessed you with just one person that can really challenge you, that's like your brother or your sister, that can really challenge you to grow and become a better person, because hey, Jesus did it, so we want to do it too, right? All right, you guys, thanks for joining me on Random Bible number 4. I'll see you next time with a different hat and probably another ukulele solo, and maybe I'll perform freestyle rap. I'm just kidding. I didn't mean to scare you. So, all right, I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for joining me.